Charlie X-Ray, and he's the founder of DX Commander and spends lots of time designing and building the DX Commander antenna system. And fitting into the club's theme of QRP, is going to now give an interesting talk about his experience with the DX Commanders and QRP. And before I start, is the recording running already? It is. Good. Okay, Callum, I'm handing over to you now. So welcome, Callum, for his talk. I'm going to spotlight you. Here we go.
Ah, right. We're live on the show. 221 of us at 10:30 on the 6th of September. A very good morning, everybody. It's a lovely sunny day outside in the Midlands here. It's funny, you know, when you get introduced and people say what you are about to present, you think that's not what I'm going to do, but it's kind of what we're going to do. So you'll probably see in the background here, I've got this YouTube cushion, and that's because I'm mostly, you'll see this room and me presenting on YouTube on the DX Commander YouTube channel. So if you've been living under a rock recently, you might not know that. So I'm quite used to sitting in front of the camera here. But I also use my smartphone and go out and record what I'm doing, okay? Yes, we'll talk about DX Commanders, but in the flavor of the G-QRP club, I just wanted to make it more generic. And at the end of this, I've got a bit of a challenge for you if you're interested. So, right, well, I'm M0MCX. I live in the Midlands, and I was a suit and tie, double cuffs, you know, all that sort of stuff for many, many years. But I ended up with a strange haircut about 15 years ago because I told everybody, I had my own company at the time, I told them all that I didn't want to go on client meetings anymore. So I got rid of all my suits and gave myself a funny haircut. But it turns out they carried on sending me to client meetings. But I finally got rid of that company last year to devote my time to the ultimate job, for me anyway, which is mucking around with aerials. So yes, I make and sell something called a DX Commander, and there's a couple of variants, and I've got some pictures for you. But I'm not honestly here to sell today. EHAM and word of mouth does that better than I do it here. But if you don't know what a DX Commander is, I'll show you some pictures in a bit, okay? So, like many of us, I got into radio by observing someone else on a radio one day. I mean, I remember having the Royal Signals come once to the school, and I thought that was amazing because he was using a radio teletype printer. He was printing out pictures of eagles and stuff using ASCII pictures, you know, tremendous. And but years later, I got a job on this private yacht. And we had an HF set on board. I couldn't believe it. I was just saying to Wendy, we're out in the garden before this. And I said I was going to kick off with this story, you see. I couldn't believe it. The captain used to pick up this. It was like a handset, you know, what the police used to use. And he would press some buttons on this HF set, which was kind of a 19-inch Raycal sort of thing. This is 78 now, 79. And he would call for Portishead Radio. And he'd get through. And we had a call sign of Golf Victor India Delta. I always remember the call sign. Portishead Radio, this is Golf Victor India Delta. And they would come back clear as a bell. I honestly don't know what frequency it was. Marine, probably is that 8 megahertz, something like that. Tremendous. So, cut long story short, years later, I ended up with a license. You know, I took the last ever radio amateur exam, which was it's a one big gulp thing, you know. Had I not done that, I'd have had to do foundation, intermediate, whatever. So I had the pleasure of attending a radio club meeting, and a fellow called Nigel, G4 November Radio, or November Radio, NRR, I think he was. And he lived in Devon, but he happened to be in the Midlands, and he did this presentation, which totally inspired me. And it gave me more information in 20 minutes than I'd gained in a couple of years. So I'm not going to repeat his presentation, but I'm going to tell you what the kind of fundamental building blocks, if you know what I mean, of antennas and bits of wire. And this fits very well with QRP, by the way. So let's just go back to basics. A dipole. Now, a dipole, I think we both, you and me, 228 and me. A dipole is 2/4 wave legs, isn't it? Fed in the middle with a piece of coax. And we take the center and we go one way, and we take the braid and we go the other way in its simplest terms. And you can debate till the cows come home whether you should have a choke there. Yes, you should, but let's not worry about that right now. Now, as Nigel said to me, that suited me very well, by the way. And it suited me because when I first got into ham radio, I had no money really. We still had the children, you know, and I was kind of doing deals, you know, selling off old hobbies to pay for I got a 902 DM, which is like an FT101 ZD, all right, big lump of a thing. And I had no ATU. I couldn't afford anything really. I had this radio and a bit of wire and some odd bits of coax that I'd half-inched from here and there, you know. So it quickly dawned on me that I can put up dipoles, and it was pretty efficient, as we all know. Now, a dipole is next resonant at 3 times the frequency you're on, plus or minus. Won't get into that at the moment. So if I've got a dipole for 7 megahertz, 3 7s are 21. So the next resonant point is the 15 meter band. Now, at the moment, there's not a lot going on 15 meters. Anyway, it works. Whereas a loop, on the other hand, resonates on every harmonic, isn't it? So if you've got something on 7 megahertz, you double that, goes to 14, you triple that, goes to 21, 28, and so on. And for years, well, I'd say certainly for 5 years, I had a 40-meter triangle in the back that just fitted in and no more. Wasn't a perfect triangle, but it worked. And sure enough, I had a 4-to-1 balun, and I tuned it on 721. And that was my multi-band antenna. I didn't spend much time on 17 or 12 or whatever. And I think by this time I had an FT1000 MP, whatever it's called. And I could hit the ATU button and get a tune on there, but I couldn't get down to 80. So how one of the ways you can get on 80 is you can take your 40-meter loop and cut a bit out the middle at the far end. And I used to do that with crocodile clips. So I'd take the crocodile clips off, and I'd now end up with this equivalent of a dipole, folded dipole, you know, like a halo. I could go on 18. If I wanted to get on 40, I'd go back to the garden, lower the loop down, put the crocodile clips back on, and lift it back up, and I'd be back on 40. So a loop resonates on every harmonic, and a dipole on every odd harmonic, effectively. That's the easy way. But I don't know about you, but I experimented with verticals back in the early noughties, if you like, 2005, 6, 7, 8. I'd heard that big verticals with, you know, elevated radials, because I bought the ON4UN low band DX's book, and this was going to be, you know, if you want a really efficient antenna, you've got to have these raised radials. Now, I found it absolutely CRAP, to be honest, and I didn't get on very well at all with a raised vertical, raised radials. And but I tell you what I discovered in 2013 is that I could bought a 10-meter pole, now called a DX Commander, but I bought this 10-meter pole and I had 40. And I just had a bit of inspiration. I don't know if anybody had done it before. Would it be possible to, you know, I'd go on holiday with a Tesco box. That's a shopping box, you know, from the supermarket. And I put bits of wire and soldering irons. You know, I don't anymore, but I used to literally take an experimenter's box. I had my multimeter with me and everything. and I soldered another a 20-meter vertical next to the 40 and just separated it with a bit of tape and some bamboo or whatever was knocking around. Now, just go back to basics here. I know there's some old timers on that know all this, but let's not assume anything. So my vertical, I came along with a piece of coax. I took the center of the coax and went straight up my pole. And I just kept cutting it and folding it until I got a tune on 40 meters. And that gave me a tune, by the way, on about 21.55. I'll come back to that in a minute. Anyway, I ran this 20 meter up the other side. I don't think it was far enough away, and I could get a tune, but it wasn't very good. Now, like QRP, maybe, I don't know, because I'm in the wrong room, all right? I'm a bit of a QRO man. So I like going on holiday with an amplifier. And with an amplifier, particularly a modern amplifier, you don't really want to run high SWR. So everything I've ever built, because I used to do all my experiments on holiday, everything I've ever built, I would want resonant antennas. I didn't want balance line tuners or tuning the nuts off a piece of coax with a big outboard tuner. So I want to run high power. That forces you to think about the most efficient antenna I can get. So I heat nothing up, nothing melts, and it's just resonant. But it did inspire me because I had a 7-meter pole with me as well. And I put a 20, a 15, a 10, and a 6. And it worked. So the only fly in the ointment was the fact that this 20 and 40 was, maybe it was too close together. Now, I happen to have a workshop in Lapworth on a farm because I had another little couple, lots of little companies over the years. And so I bought a drill press and bits of aluminium and stuff, and I started to prototype quite a big piece, probably 6 to 8 inches, 120, 150 mil aluminium circles I bought off eBay and drilled them out and stuff. And I made that into my radiating plate. So I got the distance at about 6 inches wide and put some elements up there. And I discovered, because if a dipole is resonant on every odd harmonic, and all a vertical is a dipole upside down or 90 degrees, isn't it? So the ground is one side of your dipole and the vertical is the other bit. So remembering back to Nigel's chat, and I built a spreadsheet because I'm thinking, where else do all the harmonics knock in? Well, we're lucky actually, because 314s, well, that's not on the handbands. That's a 20-meter band. In fact, so the only fly in the ointment is the 40-meter band, which is knocking 15 off because it was resonant about 21.5, 21.6. It just so happens, and this is maybe something I know and you don't know, I discovered that if I made my 40-meter element a bit short and folded it back on itself, I could get a perfect tune on 7. And hey, all of a sudden, I got 40 meters, 15 meters came back down as well. Now, occasionally I lift my arm up and you see all this mess on it. That's because last night I managed to burn myself on some hot fat. So that was a hot air gun. That was the week before. So I'm a professional, burning myself up here. Right. So where are we going to go from here? Let me just show you some pictures. So I'll just need some screen sharing, which I think I can do myself. Oh, no, I can't. Hang on. Just expand this out for you.
You should have screen share permission.
Yeah, I have. I can do that myself. I think it is that one there. So with any luck, you might be seeing a picture of a blue sky. So give me a Roger on that one.
Yes, Roger.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. Lovely. So this is beyond the prototype. So if you don't know what DX Commander is, it's a 10-meter pole, and we've got all the quarter waves, like a fan dipole, going up the pole. In fact, you may be able to see right off the top there, I've also got 80 meters as well. So this is it. Typically, I go on holiday and I take a load of kit with me, and Wendy gets a little bit annoyed. So you got all these are my my ground radials. connecting to a plate. I think I've got a close up of that little guy point made out of something called UHMWPE, ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. And there we are. Now, if I hit the home button now, this is a slightly different one. This is called the I call it the Expedition. So this is a 2-foot pole which expands up to 10 meters, and it has 3 elements, not 6. Everything's a little bit lighter. I try to get the cost down. It's just as high, and works very well as well. So I just wanted to show you this. Right, a few pictures. Stop sharing. Found the button. Lovely. Just in case you didn't know what it is. I'll come up with a challenge in a minute. So you could do that with a fan dipole. You can make these yourself, by the way, a bit of plastic. But you might be thinking, well, how well does it work? So I visit a lot of clubs, and I put my hand up and I say, you know, is anybody an HF here? And, you know, half the group put their hand up. And I go around the room very often, and I find out what antenna they use. And sometimes they go G5RV, long wire, some end-fed, contraption, whatever else. There's only one person I've found who had a dedicated homebrew 17-meter vertical, and he'd hung off a tree. He said it works great, which I was absolutely delighted about. The challenge is, you see, is when is the last time you built a vertical? Now, most of us have got a small garden or a large garden or whatever else, and maybe a tree or a fishing pole knocking around. I would thoroughly recommend you just try it yourself. Get about 4.95 meters of wire, put a loop on the end, bit of paracord and a tennis ball, throw it over the tree, bring it down to the base, solder it, if you like, or clip or whatever you want, straight onto the end of the coax, and then put the braid, you know, solder some sort of lug on it, and put 2 or 3 wavelengths, and that's not a lot, by the way, on 20 meters, say 70 meters of wire, and they don't need to be long. They can be like 1/8 of a wave, so on 5 meters on 20-meter band, it can be about 2.5, just bigger than a man, roughly. About 30 of them in bunches of 6, and just, I don't know, some sort of lug, butterfly, nuts, throw them out on the floor and come back into the shack and see what it's like. Now, on receive, it might sound a bit noisy, but I think you'll find on transmit, all of a sudden you're getting out. Now, I don't know how many people have tried this, but that is definitely my challenge. Because if some people say to me, "Oh, will a DX Commander work in my lot or backyard in America?" And I say, "Well, just put up a single vertical and find out for yourself, because that's all this is. It's just lots of them. Is there any interaction? I don't. I've built fan dipoles where you've got the feed point all close together, and people you go on EHAM about this. They go on and on about it, don't they? And a separation is really critical and everything else. What I found is if you separate the feed point, mine's on a big disc like this, then in fact mine go the opposite way. My feed point's very wide and they all taper up. That's fine. That seems to work great. A couple of things you might not know. With bits of wire and element lengths, I was taught that if you fold back, there's a lot of myth about this. Don't cut your wire, you fold it back. Now, so when's this now? About 10 years ago, it was the club calls contest. This is a 160-meter contest. And I can't get on 160 from my garden. I can now from the farm where I've got my workshop. But we wanted to put a team of 4 on or something. So I thought, well, I've got this lighting tower, right, which goes up and down, and a bit of wire. And I said to them, well, what I'll do, we'll go up to the hills where it's really quiet. And there's a little team of us, 4 of us, we went up there. And it was dark by the time it was set up. And we might have even forgot to bring the light, you know, it's all torches and stuff. We got the generator running. But about 20 minutes before we set off, I'd modelled this piece of wire, and I said, oh, it needs to be such and such a long. But it was far too long. According to my calculations, it was about 5 meters too long, because 160 meters is enormous. So it's each leg's 40 meters, isn't it? And our sort of tent area where we were working was near the middle. So to make one adjustment, I've got to run 40 meters that way, plus about another 40 meters, because you got the guy wire. Becomes very long. I had to disconnect it all. I folded it back my 4 meters, ran 100 and something meters up to the other end, adjusted it all, came back down, and it hardly made any difference. And it hardly made any difference because I've since done some more experiments and discovered that if you fold back insulated wire, what actually happens is that for every meter you want to change, you calculate it, don't you? 7 divided by 300, you know, and you go, oh, it's too long. So you go and adjust it. But if you fold it back, it's a 3-to-1 exchange. So in other words, if I wanted to shorten something by 1 meter, I can equivalently fold it back 3 meters. I haven't done all the, I need to make a video about this. Or if you wanted to lengthen an antenna by 1 meter or 1 foot, you can fold, you don't fold it back, you would have to add 3-to-1. Which is one of the reasons that my 40 meter quarter wave works so well. And what's the time? 51. Just seeing where else we could go with this. I'm used to doing like a 20-minute thing on YouTube. So what about some questions? Should we do that? And that'll keep me going.
Okay.
Is everybody on mute here?
No. Yes, Callum. We have some questions. I have 2 questions here in the Q&A. So Shirley K1L asks, how do you get your portable antennas to stand up?
Well, I mean, that's the... I actually watched a video the other night. The guy just held it. He's just holding it. So guying off poles is... there's only 2 ways, isn't there? A couple of bungee straps around a farmer's post, if you're out portable, or a little nylon plate, or a Jubilee, what Americans call a hose clamp. You put a hose clamp on your portable pole and insulate it with, say insulate it, put a nice bit of aquarium tube, slip it into the hose clamp so it doesn't damage your fiberglass, and just put loops on your paracord and you can tie it off to stuff, and that works very well. I've used it that way for a while. I've also strapped it to the farmer's gate, you know, when I've been out portable. So that's, I mean, the other thing is most of these poles have a little screw base, don't they? Or some sort of cap you can pop off. And you can either have a piece of angle iron or some aluminium with you. You can hammer in the ground and extend it, and then you can drop it over. That works as well. So that's good. What's the other one? Maybe I can read it myself. Have I operated QRP? We'll do have I operated QRP. Let's just do that one now, actually. So I made a couple of videos about CB, all right. And in my day, CB was 4 watts. And of course, in a modern day, these CB or 11 meter guys, they've all got, you know, 7300s or 450s or, you know, 756 Pro 3s for the 11 meter band. And they're all doing at minimum 100 watts. In my day, it was 4 watts. And when I got somewhere, it was really cool. But I got a bit fed up with some of these comments I was getting on my YouTube channel. So I thought, well, we'll do a 10 watt night, you know, now. That's barely QRP, isn't it? But it was actually to show the M7s that with a decent antenna, and this was on 80 meters. And I really was on 10 watts. You know, I showed them my screen on the, you know, to what I was doing. And it was in the evening, 10 watts with a doublet with balance line. at 45 feet. Bit of an ask, I realise that. But yeah, and I was holding a pile up easily, you know, absolutely easily. So, and that surprised me. That's probably the only reason I've agreed to come on here, is that I can say that this year I really did 10 watts. I think my radio will go to 5, and I'm looking to do a 5-watt night soon. What else did we have?
We have a
Mark?
couple of questions in the Q&A. So Graham, G4NMD, is asking, trouble is on many urban sites, the noise floor is already high. So does the inherent noise in a vertical become too great a disadvantage?
Yeah. So I've been chatting about with Rowley ZL1 BQD on this. And to use his words, it's conventional wisdom. Well, ever since, you know, aluminium Yagis got invented, really, we have been, I think, conned into believing that our transmit antenna is also our receive antenna. Now, if you're in an urban, if you're out portable, it's generally not a problem, is there? But I've got a back garden here and I'm surrounded by houses. And Ian, G0CNN, I think, he just did a video, it was released yesterday, with his loop on the ground. Anyway, Rowley and I have been talking because he took 20 meters of wire of 1 foot off the ground, just like an inverted L, but only 1 foot. He did this a couple of weeks ago with a 30 dB preamp, which obviously, anyway, he put that into his receive jack, because a lot of these radios have got a receive jack. So if you're in an urban lot, the idea of having your transmit antenna as your primary receive antenna, I'm thinking, might be a bit old-fashioned. If you go back to what the old boys did 70 years ago, most of them had 2 antennas. Very often, they'd have 2 rigs. They'd have a receive rig and a transmit rig. Going back all the way, they probably built them themselves, wouldn't they? And they would have their receive antenna coming into one radio and their transmit antenna coming into the other radio. And I honestly think, with the amount of clutter going on in the RF spectrum, is that a loop on the ground or half an inch under the ground, you know, after it's buried itself, is possibly the way out. He's got some people have had better results than others. There we are. But Rowley was picking up stuff that he'd never heard on 160 before, for instance. So I find that interesting. So yes, any aerial will pick up, particularly vertical. And the reason is, it's not that all the radiation is vertically polarized particularly, is that if you look at radiation patterns for a vertical, it's generally lower. It's a lower angle than your average dipole. Your average dipole's got to be somewhere between 1/4 of a wavelength and half a wavelength to get the same low angle radiation. And so on the 20-meter band, that's going to be, you know, certainly 10 meters high. On 40 meters, you got to get to, you know, 20 meters high. So if you have a low to the ground dipole of some description, your transmit and receive gain is very high angle. So your next door neighbor's crud, that some of it is coming along low angle, it will miss you for your receive antenna. Your big vertical, though, will hear it because it's typically lower angle anyway. So I do think in the modern world, we need to start looking at more receive antennas. And this loop on the ground, excuse me, LOG they call it, some people have had some fantastic results. And I do encourage people to look at, you know, throwing this conventional wisdom, as Rowley called it, where your one antenna is supposed to do everything, down to the point where you go, hey, maybe I could have a general purpose receive antenna that does the whole medium wave, all my short wave. And it's something I haven't done yet, but I really do want to do. And I think it's important that, particularly maybe on YouTube, to show people that's the way, I think, in the modern world to get out of it. So yeah, it was a good question, wasn't it, Mark?
So we have another one here about radiation patterns and directional. So John, G0UBE asks, how directional is DX Commander if you can only spread the radials in a 20-degree arc?
Well, I've done some testing on this, and on 80 meters, so let's just get the maths right. On 80 meters, I was using 35 3.5 meter long radials in a 180-degree arc. And in the opposite direction, I had the US, and I was going on about 1 o'clock, midnight, at 400 watts in fairness. But there was a good test. But I was crossing the Atlantic on the wrong way. Now, there's some clever people on here, and I just saw something on the chat with Easy Neck and MMANA and so on. In my opinion, I think we've got about a maximum, and there's a great paper on this actually, a maximum of 3 dB gain in one direction and some front to back at the other. So there was a great paper, and I'll try and look it out and send it to the guys here for your newsletter or whatever you do. There was a great paper, and somebody did all the maths and all the field work, disconnecting all these radials and reconnecting them every often. And he had this, you know, this lobe thing. But when you looked at the numbers, all that he was achieving was a little bit of front to back. He wasn't really achieving any gain. But was it worth it? No, I seem to remember it was about 3 dB. And let's just remember what 3 dB is. You would, in the main, you'd never notice 3 dB unless the guy is super marginal on CW. You know, 3 dB isn't that much, particularly if it's a strong signal. You'd hardly notice it. I mean, if you're giving signal reports of your S8 or your S9, I think there's 6 dB supposedly between 8 and 9, and then so it's got to be super marginal to notice 3 dB. Yeah, so that's all I would say with that. I think it's a little bit of myth, and what we're 20 degrees. Oh, it'll work. Of course, it'll work. Any aerial is better than no aerial. Would you get a great match? I don't know. If a couple of them were quite long, you probably would, but it would work. I mean, who was it now? Was it Pro Whip? He used to sell this thing. I think it was a little transformer or something, and he recommended one radial. And I saw the boys at the club doing this. Basically, it's one radial and one element. And they were still working. I mean, it wasn't very good. I mean, the thing is, with QRP, I mean, some people who aren't genuine QRPers, right? There's some people that think they're QRP but aren't. So they'll go, oh yeah, I'm QRP. But when you look at their equipment, it's just rubbish, okay? I think a lot of good QRP guys, they're making stuff as well, and they're into efficiency. And it's a great similarity in a weird way between a very keen high power guy and a very keen low power guy, because in my case, if I'm testing something at 1500 watts, I don't want anything to melt. So I use very high quality connectors, very high quality coax. I want every dB I can generate to go in the right direction. After all, it cost a lot of money to do this, let's say. A keen QRP guy should think the same thing. He should think, I want good quality coax, I want good quality connectors, I want my gear to be working right. There is a lot of similarities between a QRO and a QRP guy. The guy the fly in the ointment man is the man who thinks that QRP is just cheap. Any hobby done right isn't cheap, is it? Any hobby done right means there's some thinking about it. Just because you QRP doesn't mean to say you need to use 100 feet of RG58 all the time. There's better coax to use. There's better connectors you can use. And I think particularly at the antenna end, there's nothing wrong with a bit of wire. All right, but I was doing actually research only last night because somebody's built me this end-fed transformer. We're going to see if we can blow it up just for fun. But as soon as I build something that can heat up, I'm thinking, what losses are in that? So an end-fed half wave. Now, my research is suggesting it's probably only about half a dB to half a dB. I don't know. I always thought there might be more losses because anything that comes with a power limit says, oh, no more than 100 watts. So Rowley was sent something that said it was allowed 100 watts. He put 100 watts in and it blew up. So if it blew up or melted, what losses are in that? That's a commercial product, not a home brew. I think most home brew stuff is actually higher quality because, you know, take some time over it and that sort of thing. I can't remember what the question was now, but that's my answer.
Okay, thanks, Callum. There is a couple of questions about the use of the DX Commander as a permanent antenna, particularly in a small garden.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion about that?
Well, when I designed, so I designed everything I build it because I want it. So I use my own stuff. I'm one of the few guys that I love my own gear. And I use it. And when I originally designed it, I designed it for the caravanner, the holiday guy, and so on. But the physical pole, I didn't design it this way, but it's come out that it's fairly hard wearing. So I would say 95% of the classic, the DX Commander Classic, the original one, it's a 4-foot, 1.2 meter pole. It's fairly substantial. You know, it's not the sort of thing you can put in your backpack. 95% of those sit permanently in people's back gardens. And that's the way it is. Ian's got one. I mean, there's plenty of people on YouTube with them who are permanent. And you'll find when you put the radials down, you just stretch them out, tack them in with a bit of wood or whatever else, and that within a couple of weeks they disappear anyway. So radials are fine. The pole is the kind of cheapest part of the do, and if it breaks, I do a kind of a half price exchange because, you know, I've broken a lot of stuff in my time, and it annoys me that I'd buy something and I'd do a schoolboy error and I've got to buy it all over again. So rather than me stocking all the little bits, they just get a brand new pole and they can keep the old one. That's what I do there. So permanent, yeah. Do it. But what I'd suggest, I'd go back to the challenge. Build yourself maybe an inverted alpha 40, or which is just up and along, isn't it? And it's easy just to chop it back and get it working. See what an inverted L is, maybe on 80. But I would definitely build something in your backyard before you bought my product. Not to satisfy, I mean, I'm sure it'll work and everything. It's just good fun. I want people to be their own scientists and to build something yourself and it works. You think, oh, maybe I could make a DX Commander anyway. And some people have. They sent me the pictures. They're very proud. And I'm very proud of them as well. A lot of people, though, go and try and make one and think, well, it does work, but I'll buy the real one now because it's all water jet and laser cut and all the components. It just, you know, I've got the time to invest in all the bits and pieces. Yes, anything like that is works perfectly for backyards, even if it's small. I've done a couple of videos actually, Mark, on radials. So did a fella. I only copied Rudy Sevens' excellent fieldwork, by the way. So what Rudy Sevens did in the old days, he took 16 radials. So your efficiency curve, it's somewhere between 16 and 20 quarter wave radials. Starts to, the laws of diminishing returns start to kick in. So he took 16 quarter wave radials and he did some very, very careful measurements on field strength and so on. And then what he did, he thought, well, what happens if I cut these quarter waves in half, but bolt them in as well? So we've got the same amount of copper on the ground, and it was barely measurable difference. Okay, so 1/8 of a wave, doubling your quantity to 1/8 of a wave, and that's why I've gone all the way down to 3.5 meters only on the 80 meter band. Now it's still working. I could have probably been maybe 3 or 6 dB better by putting a lot more down, but it's not as much as you think. I mean, after sort of 4, 8, 16, And then would you notice the difference? Probably not. I'm just about to put a huge 80-meter vertical in my antenna field, and I've gone completely over the top just to get the last dB. But the difference between 16, I've done the numbers, 16 and 120 radials, it's like a dB or a dB and a half. You know, I think we con ourselves sometimes. We need tons and tons of radials. It's not. And the problem with elevated radials, and Rudy Sevens done the field work on this as well, is it needs to be, all on these starts needs to be very accurate, otherwise it doesn't work. And also you've got the garrote problem with raised radials, and this you get them really high. I think raised radials on VHF is fantastic because you buy these little diamond things, don't they? And they come with the spokes. But doing that on HF is very hard. And multi-banding it, of course, is even harder. You can multi-band with several elements with your ground mat. Works a treat, Mark. So this is good. What else have we got?
Rachel M1AYG is asking, how do you stop the pole collapsing into itself vertically? Is it still clamps, or are they likely to damage the pole?
I ship some stainless hose clamps and a length of PVC or whatever it is, aquarium tubing, and you slip them on, you see, and that works fine. For temporary overnight, I personally don't bother. Put one at the base, you know, a couple at the very, you know, where it's all going to happen, and then I just yank it out. Some people have glued them. I don't know the best glue. Apparently super glue actually works very well, because as you stretch it out, you get that becomes permanent. Gorilla glue, I think, would work quite well as well. But I use clamps, and they don't seem to. So maybe a couple of times a year, I've somebody goes, oh, I've over tightened it and I've cracked the pole, or I heard a crack. You know, what do I do about it? And I said, well, waiting for it to fail, and I'll send you another one at half price. So you can get lucky, because there's some people you put them up. I had a guy just last week, so I took my pole, a fellow called Don, actually in America. I took the pole down, he said, and I can't collapse it. It's stuck. So there is a way. You just tap it on a piece of concrete, ding, 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 and you release each section that way. So Rachel, good question, but that's how we do it. What else have we got?
I see a couple of people suggesting like SNEC for antenna as an antenna modeling software. So I just formulate this in a question.
Yeah.
Do you use antenna modeling software, and what kind of software are you using or system?
So I use M0MCX, which is a similar engine. I think it is actually the same engine. And I've done, go on YouTube and just look for M0MCX. I must have done 30 videos to teach people, because I can now look at an aerial and I look at it, I can almost see the RF, because I've built that many models and then done the field work. I can, you know, it's like having these RF glasses. I can kind of see where the RF's coming from. I'm not that interested in the impedance and all that sort of stuff, because we know that a dipole, depending on the height above the ground, anywhere between about 50 and 80 ohms, and we know a vertical with 4 or 8 radials is going to give you about 46 ohms, and you keep pumping in more and more, you eventually end up with an SWR about 1.3 to 1. And then you can do 3/4 waves, which is you know, and what the radiation pattern looks like and that. And so M0MCX, and I'd very recommend you go on YouTube. That's what I've got, over 600 videos on YouTube, and I would say my early days must have been about 30 videos about how to build your aerial in M0MCX, because it's easier than EasyNet, because it's got a little drawing interface. You can just draw your aerial, you see. So that's what I do, and that's where I can kind of demonstrate outside the field. I normally do that sort of stuff in the winter, and then we do the field work in the summer, you see. And you can see where your angle is, and you can change your ground conditions, and you can go down by the sea, and you realize, oh yes, there really is 10 dB gain down by the beach. It's fantastic. So if you're anywhere near a beach, or you can get a day out where you can drive a couple of hours maybe and get your little thing, whatever it is, particularly a little vertical, 20 meters, 17 meters, 10 dB is a lot, isn't it? So that's what I use, Mark.
Okay, another question about radiation patterns. So Dave, G7WHI is asking, hi Callum, what is the radiation pattern of the vertical 40-meter element used on 15-meter?
Right, very interesting. I've just done a video about 5/8 and pseudo 5/8 antennas, and it was only last Friday night it came out. So I'll tell you the nuts and bolts of it. Is that if you take if you baseline, here we are, if you baseline any quarter wave for any set frequency and you measure it at 5 degrees off the horizon, because you've got to remember that most of our RF, most of our DX propagation is coming in between about 3 and 8 degrees off the horizon. Now, years ago, I used to baseline my, I used to baseline a lot of my antennas at 10 degrees off the horizon, but I was conning myself. I was thinking, oh, that looks good, 2 dB, 3 dB, and that sort of thing. Whereas at 5 degrees, and the manufacturers aren't going to tell you this, at 5 degrees, a quarter wave on average ground, British soil, will give you about -5 to -6 dB at 5 degrees off the horizon. So knowing that, you can then build all sorts of stuff in software and find out, what is this doing at 5 degrees off the horizon. Now, what was the question again, Mark? Because I'll finish this one off.
The question, I clicked it already away.
No, don't worry. It was about...
it was about the 40-meter vertical.
Oh, yeah. Here we are, the three-quarter wave. Yeah. So now, if you go on EHAM and QRZ forums and that sort of thing, and you look at three-quarter wave verticals, everybody will tell you it's a cloud warmer. That's because some extra RF, not extra RF, but some of the bubble of RF goes upwards as well. If you actually measure this in software and come down to 5 degrees off the horizon, you'll find it's about 3 dB better than your equivalent quarter wave, all right? So don't be fooled by the far field plot, actually measure it. Now, the other thing you can do is you remember that's three-quarter waves. If a commercial 5/8, it's basically a three-quarter waves with a loading core on the bottom to make it shorter, because the pattern on 64%, not 75%, which is 3/4, 64% pattern, what that does, that squashes the top lobes down, all right, and gives you a tiny bit of extra gain, and then the pattern looks really nice on a 5/8. Just gives you a tiny bit, an extra maybe dB and a half at 5 degrees. So I mean, I can't prove it, all right, but because I like solid proof. But if you go up and then come back down, which is what we're doing on 15 meters on the DX Commander, is I'm effectively shortening its physical length, all right, but still getting a three-quarter wave tune. The advantage of a three-quarter wave tune is that it's naturally closer to 50 ohms, which is why a lot of manufacturers have got a problem getting 40 meters and 15 working together, because 40 meters is always going to want to resonate. A 40-meter dipole will resonate again at just above the top end of 21.45, 21.55, and I've always had that problem myself until I folded it back and realized then that actually now what I can do is I can tune 15 meters now according to the foldback. It just so happens that if you then remeasure the whole thing after you've done that, it's about 65%, which is 1% off our perfect sweet spot, 64% 5/8. I realize 5/8 is actually 62.5%. But even if it was just a three-quarter wave, you would still be getting 3 dB at 5, and at 6 degrees, even better again, and it just goes up and up and up. So that's so build yourself a 3/4 wave, maybe for the 10-meter band. A 3/4 wave is only 7.5 meters. Put that on the ground. Hey, and a lot of people think, oh, this is not going to work. It's not going to work if I do a ground-mounted 10-meter. Oh, because we're all used to, remember the CB days, you'd have your silver rod or whatever, you know, on the chimney. I was astonished. I mean, when I made this thing, I didn't know it was gonna work. I really didn't. And I'm running all the sporadic. It happened to be in the summer. I was just running big numbers on 10 meters. I mean, it's amazing. And by the way, if it resonates every odd harmonic, effectively, so you've got a quarter wave, 3/4 wave, the next time it resonates is 1 1/4 wave. Now the pattern doesn't look very good at all. But again, at 5 degrees, you would compete roughly with a quarter wave until you went to 1 3/4 waves. Weirdly enough, there's these fantastic lobes that come out that are perfect for DX. Now, 1 3/4 waves for most of the HF band is probably too big, but try it on 6 meters, try it on 2 meters. 1 3/4 waves, you'd be amazed. And again, we're getting this, certainly at 3/4 wave, you're getting a great match to your coax. There'd be no loss at all. Tremendous. So that was a good question, Mark.
Okay, so I see there's lots of interest in radials. So,
Yeah.
for example, Carl M0MCX is asking, I've enjoyed following your YouTube videos for some time, and I'm an enthusiastic user of the DX Commander Lite. Can you say more about your thoughts on the use of radials for verticals, please?
Yeah. Sometimes I think as a hobby, we overcomplicate things. I mean, just to give it 5 minutes, if you go back to the 1930s or whenever it was, there was an original sort of broadcast paper produced. I don't know, I found it somewhere, which recommended the 120 radials, a quarter of a wavelength long. And that's become a baseline to for some reason, as amateurs want to copy as well. Now, but because I've thought about this, let's say your transmit license is $50,000 a year, and you're trying to cover as many towns as you can, and then you say to your engineer, you know, how much is, you know, if I can get 1 more dB from going from, because it is about that, going from 30 radials to 120. Let's go to 120, you know, 1 dB. I might just catch another 25 households because they, you know, an AM station is going to want, you know, 40 over really. You want a massive signal, don't you? You just want to push your bubble of RF as far as it'll go. So the most, you know, the best ground screen they can. And that's, I think, one of the reasons the broadcasters always went down at 120. Now, ON4UN in his book, the Low Band DX's book, also recommended 120 quarter wavelengths. But it was what changed this for me was, one, reading Rudy Seven's paper, which is a little bit like Greek, in fairness, about radials, and particularly the paper where he cut his radials in half but added them back in. Now, he didn't go any further than that, all right? He only went as far as 1/8 of a wave. Well, what about 1/16 of a wave? And that's what I've been doing. And I sometimes think that maybe it's the ground that people have got. Maybe, I don't know what it is. But in the main, I don't know of a customer that has been disappointed with either a homebrew vertical and you've got to persevere with these things, by the way, all right? If you're going to homebrew something like this, if you've got a very high noise floor, well, you got a high noise floor. You're going to have a high noise floor anyway. I mean, all you're doing is, by increasing your noise floor, is that you're proving to yourself that your low angle receive is now better. But so's your transmit, which goes back to the original argument, which says, why don't we go down a receive loop or a really low to the ground dipole, 6 inches above the ground, around the garden or something? So it doesn't pick up, and a preamp, it doesn't pick up your local QRM as much. And the thing is, I've done 4 or 5 quite intense videos. It's not that I don't want to repeat myself. We're in private company here. I can repeat myself. I know that. But it's, I think, more simple than we think it is. I think sometimes, and I certainly did, I read too many books and discounted too many things before I started it. So an example was, we called it the mega loop, which is 160 meters. So I think it was about 158, 156 meters of wire in one big triangle. We put it in down the Scout Hut. 100 years ago. It just so happens that somebody planted 3 oak trees in exactly the right place. And but all the books tell you that these triangles and loops are what they call cloud warmers. In other words, most your RF goes straight up. But there was very little documentation. But I proved it in software. I said to James, I said, oh, look, at multiple wavelengths up the scale, like on 20, 15, 10, opposite the feed point, because we fed it in one corner, got this huge, it's like a beam, you know. I mean, we were achieving something like 14 to 20 dB better than a single vertical in one direction, you know. There was other, it was like a clock face actually, but there was this opposite. It just so happened to be about 290 degrees, which from the UK hits most of the, certainly from New York down to Florida. And crikey, I had to turn the power down to, I think my FT 1000 MP only went down to 10 watts. I couldn't go down any further, I don't believe. I had to go down to 10 watts most afternoons to slow the pile up down. And even then, people were giving me, you know, 5.9, because, you know, 15 dB extra gain is an enormous number, by the way. You know, it's like running kilowatts. It's amazing. But anyway, so what I'm saying there is, and a lot of people on EHAM said, no, you're mistaken. It's a cloud warmer, because they read the books, but they don't do the field work. And a lot of people say to me, I don't know why you're making this video, because in the 1962 ARRL handbook, you know, page 62, it says, there's the answer. Why bother doing it yourself? Well, why bother doing it? Because it's a science hobby. We should be doing these things ourselves, because, you know, there's a couple of times where I've discovered something that isn't documented. The mega loop was one thing. The fan dipole vertical thing, DX Commander, I have since found a couple of, you know, there's a couple of papers that kind of replicate, but not identical. Because it's probably like you walk around your DIY superstore, you know, and I walk around, I go, oh, that make a good aerial. I see an extendable broom handle or something, you know. Oh, I make good aerial, you know. I could use that for whatever else, because I love experimenting. And I think because I'm not a builder of electronics, that's not my thing. I wasn't taught right in the first place. I rehearsed my exam to pass every other bit, apart from the electronics, which was enough to give me my M0 ticket. So I was never schooled properly in the first place. So I fully realized that I missed some of this hobby out with the electronics. And I don't apologize for it, because I think there's a lot of people like that. I am an appliance operator, but there's one thing I can do, which is I can make cock-ups with bits of wire in the garden. And this is what I did for years. Winding coils, and, you know, oh, that shortens it by this much. That changes its third harmonic by that. Because a lot of the papers that we go and read, I don't know about some of you guys, you do a bit of research, like, oh, linear loading or whatever else, and you end up with this paper, you know, it's probably very accurate, but it reads like Greek or wallpaper. And I've got the attention span of a small gnat sometimes, particularly if it's late at night, everybody's gone to bed, and I think, oh, I just want to do that research. And you find this paper, you know, I haven't got time to read this now, right? Give me a little picture, right? So I can go and build this myself and understand how it works for me. So that was give me your inspiration, or give me a chat about radials, and we ended up with that. But that's it. I think it's simpler than we think it is. There we are. Yes, there's some losses in the ground, right? But that is far outweighed by the radiation angle we're getting on our transmittability. Mark.
Okay, next one from Ellen, G0TPH. Hi, is there much interaction between bands when you multi-band a vertical, to the extent that if I added or removed a band element, is it likely to detune the other vertical elements?
Well, I've never found that. There's this whole subject called mutual coupling, and some antennas are actually designed so it'll work on 6 and 4 or whatever. But there's no driven element for 4, but it still works. So that's mutual coupling. Now, all our RF that we generate, and we've got a metal drain pipe, we've got the house wiring and everything else. Very often, this is what I think. I think in nice and simple terms, you've got this energy comes off, it hits a bit of wire that may couple a little bit, but in the main, it doesn't want that energy and just re-radiates it, in simple terms. So if we go back to a vertical antenna, and I've modeled, my screen is really high resolution, and MMA and A would be tiny on your screen, but anyway, I have modeled a multi-band vertical. And if you look at the currents, you'll see that they're all, you've got the one resonant and bit of wire element. But you'll see where the current distribution is, they're all, it says they're all radiating. They're not all radiating, really. What's happening is they're just re-radiating the energy that couples with it. It doesn't hinder, it doesn't add anything. It just basically becomes, in my opinion, it becomes inert. So in the main, if you take one away, it might change by a whisker, right? But it's a bit like, which is my answer. But you go, in my early days, you do an EHAM search, or you would do a search on QRZ or whatever else, and you've got this guy going, oh, I'm building this fan dipole, you know, and they overcomplicate it. You know, I built this one first, and I add this. If roughly you just build a fan dipole, yeah, it's about right. Okay, I don't know if it is right, but according to the numbers, that's about right. Okay, and you just string it up. It doesn't matter which one you adjust next. It's irrelevant, honestly. Oh, 15's about out. There we are. 20, there we are. Because all the elements are now up. So, but if you took off something like 30-meter band, which is 7.5 meters high, the chances are you'd hardly notice any difference on any other bands. And I'll tell you why. Because I've taken in 2014, well, every year, I've taken my own product away to have on holiday, you know. And I take all the toys with me, as I've explained. And sometimes I remember, I think, I can't be bothered to put all the elements up. So what's that one? I'll have 40, 20, 10, whatever else. They just work. So I know that it should, and it might have been out by 50 kilohertz. I don't know. It was good enough, if you know what I mean, Mark. But Ellen, I think it was. Nice question, yeah. But use that knowledge to think about fan dipoles as well. I don't think, but if it's built right, it shouldn't actually make much of a difference.
Okay, let's introduce another band in this. Carl, M0MCX is asking, I found a 30-band vertical element on my DX Commander Lite to be efficient on 6 meter during the sporadic E season. Yeah. Callum, do you have any experience of this, using a 30-meter element on 6 meter?
Yeah. And if you do the, just get my calculator out. If you do the numbers, it also on 40 as well. And that's because, sorry, I'm not looking at the screen, I'm just looking down a minute. I don't want paper, I want my calculator. So yeah, so that's 10 megahertz, isn't it? 10 times 5. Yeah, so that is 1.25 wavelengths. So, and I did a video here 18 months ago where I noticed the same. I go, oh, just try 6, you know. Oh my God, I got a perfect tune, right? And then I was doing FT8, I think it was, or WSJT something, JT65. and it was fine. And that's because, although it's not perfect, you've got this, there's two small lobes on a 1 1/4, which is about the same as a quarter wave in terms of performance, all right? If it's higher than about 10, 11 degrees, right, there's a massive null. But you've got to remember, a lot of the DX is coming in about 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 1 1/4 does work. 1 3/4 is even better. So that's why somebody emailed me to say, "Oh my God, I'm doing fantastic on the 70 megahertz. Is that the 4 meter band?" So we're not quite sure what element what was, but I was fairly convinced it was 1 3/4. By the way, they're not perfectly harmonically related. Well, they're harmonically related, but you would think that 7.1 times 3, right, 7.1 megahertz times 3 is going to be 21.3. Well, it's not. It is, but the next resonant point is slightly higher, and that's because I think the something to do with the wire dimensions, something to do with the wavelength is changing. It's not, in maths, it's perfectly resonant, but there's something not mathematically, and the only difference is the size of the wire. If you could absolutely replicate, if you increase the wire diameter or something, or decrease the wire diameter, it might change. I don't know. Maybe it's something to do with the capacitance and the end effect. There we are. Somebody's just told me. Thank you. But it is frequency dependent. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Pete, M0PTB, and he asks if it's important to insulate ground level radials from Earth.
I don't know. If they're too deep, that's one problem, is that they are not ground radials anymore. It's just an Earth system. And so there was a piece of research I read. I would use insulated wire because I don't want them to go too deep. I'd still want them to be, and I can't remember why. So there we are. You caught me out there.
Have you ever used a ground tuning circuit while we talk about grounding? That's what Tristan G0KAY is asking.
Tristan, I'm a really simple guy, and the advantage, one advantage of being a QRO man is that I like to find ways out of problems. That means that I don't need any circuitry at all, and which translates very well, by the way, into the QRP world. But because there's no losses, nothing can go wrong, and whatever else. But I haven't. I mean, I've used outboard tuners on ladder line, but coax fed stuff, I just normally either go dipole, loop, or with a 4-to-1 balun, or straight up straight out the vertical. But Mike M0MCX, he's just built me this 64-to-1, I think it is, end fed halfway thing we're going to have a play with, which I'm fascinated. And I said at the beginning I think there will be some losses, but I don't think there'll be a lot. Mike seems to think it's noisier than his equivalent DX Commander. Maybe that's because it's fully grounded. I don't know. Good question.
Okay, next question from Tim, G4ARI. Have you found that rain changes the resonant frequency of DX Commander or other antennas?
No. Maybe. So when I had 100 kilohertz change every time the tide came in Bude. So I used to hire this. It's very expensive, so that's why we stopped doing it, which was a shame because it's one of the few properties in the UK that I found was nice place, and that the front garden ended with a wall and then just the beach, if you know what I mean. It was quite a high, when it went down. But I used to get a different tune depending if the tide was in or out. And I discussed this through with James, and I came to the conclusion that there was always an onshore breeze, and I think there was just more salt and more damp, which changed the conductivity. And then it all dried out during the day, if the tide was out, let's say, completely dried out with the baking hot sun, and it would change the tune by about 100 kilohertz. It was enough to nearly piss me off, right? Rain, I haven't noticed a difference, but there will be, but it might not be, you might not bother to measure it. Brilliant question though.
Okay, there's plenty of other questions. So another one here from Michael G4GUG. Have you ever measured the RF current going up the vertical and also going into the radials? Can you recommend any technique to do that?
No. Who would be good at doing that? Probably someone like Rowley's ZL1BQD. That would be fantastic. Of course, the current and the radials will be distributed roughly equally amongst all of them. What I did want to do, I wanted to do this visually. I've got a certain type of plastic which absorbs RF very well. It's a black UHMWPE, and it's got high carbon content. And I know so because we had to put a recall out years ago now and replaced everybody's black with clear. I just thought it'd be really cool, but it turns out at 1,000 watts, FT8, they were going on fire. But I've still got quite a lot of it left. And what I was going to do, and I just need a spare couple of days, is run these 1 foot, 30 centimeters, up, say, 20-meter pole. You know, feed the wire through it. Just key it down, and you'll see where the high current will be. You know, is it the voltage doing it? Is it which one is going to melt first? That's a really physical way. I mean, it's typical sort of the style of my science, by the way, but we'd soon see where it is. Now, according to the modeling, it should be further down the bottom, but I don't know. So that would be brilliant. So no, I don't know how to scientifically measure it, but I know how to practically measure it. How about that, Mark?
Perfect. Okay, so Rachel M1AYG is building a cobweb antenna and asks if the DX Commander is better.
Well, what's better? It's all about angles. I mean, there's nothing wrong with a cobweb. Steve Webb, I bumped into him on 160 meters a couple of years ago. And since then, we've bumped into each other a couple of times. And I've got fantastic respect for Steve Webb, who put a real fly in the ointment, actually, when he said the original cobweb uses a matching section made of ladder line, all right? Because I'd invented something that needed a big choke. And he said, no, there'll be losses in your choke. And I didn't believe him. But to cut a long story short, I do believe him now. But it's at the edge of my ability to explain. So there we are. I've had this question quite a lot. What's best, you know, a vertical or a cobweb? Now, cobweb is a multi-band antenna. So what you need to remember is that on 20 meters, if you put it at 30 feet above the ground, on 20 meters, for a start off, it's not perfectly symmetrical, a cobweb, is it? There would be some lobe. Tries to distribute the current quite well. So you've got probably 3 or 4 dB difference to a dipole, which only gives you gain off the edge. You still get gain off the far sides, but not off the sides. And that's on 20 meters. On 10 meters, if it's 10 meters up, you're now 1 wavelength, not half a wavelength. All right. So depending on where your favorite bands are and what you like to do, because the other thing is in this hobby is that I was convinced that I needed to be on all bands all the time. I wanted 160 through to 70 centimeters. You know, you can't do that really on one antenna. And on the other hand, it takes certainly a couple of years hard graft on one band to kind of learn the band. It certainly took me a couple of years to kind of learn 40 meters. I haven't really I think I've got a grip of 80 now. I think I know how 20 works. Don't know about the other bands. All right. I might see something on a cluster one day and go, oh, whatever. But so what's best? It is, you know, any aerial's better than no aerial, isn't it? It's all about radiation patterns and how comfortable you are, because that's the other thing. How comfortable you are knowing that that lot is up there. Because I used to, you know, I've built some massive stuff in the past. I had a pair of switchable dipoles at 135 feet for 80 meters, for instance. But, you know, every hour I'm going out with a torch because it was at night. It was a temporary build. I'm looking up, making sure, you know, I'm terrified. What's going to happen? So I was always worried that the engineering was going to fail. So whereas a vertical, I don't worry so much. It falls over, it falls over. But there we are. Build your cobweb and enjoy it, and I'm sure it'll be fine.
Okay, thanks, Callum. We are getting close to the end. So I would say there is one more question from Les, GI1BZT. And Les asks, are you using any antenna analyzers for practical and field work? And what types of?
Well, I'm currently using a Metro VNA, and I'll tell you, I don't like it. So I want to buy one of those. It's about £1,000. You've got to remember that most of my work, I'm not really interested. The only thing I'm interested in is where it's resonant, because most of the stuff I'm building is a vertical anyway. So I know all the other parameters, they've been documented over the years. It's not like I've got any circuitry and I'm trying to tune something with capacitors and coils and inductance and whatever else. I know all that. I just want to know, is it sitting at 7.3 or 6.9? That's really all I need to know. Now, I bought the Metro VNA, but it's a little bit button pushy for me. I want something a little bit instant, a little bit of just give me a quick sweep sort of thing. And maybe someone can recommend on the chat here. There's a nice one. It's I don't know, £600-700, something like that. But that'll be. I will treat myself possibly next year with a really nice analyzer. I did take a picture years ago of the Metro VNA does 6 frequencies at once, and there is a picture on my website or something. I could find it now, but it'll take a couple of minutes, where you can see all the elements of the DX Commander and all the SWRs sitting at 1.1, 1.2, whatever. So that was it. So well, that's been a lot of fun. Is there any rig expert? There we are. Thanks, Nick. Yes, great. So, Mark, I normally get quite a lot of questions, which is why I budgeted for about 25 minutes chit-chat, and the rest has flown by, hasn't it?
Oh, it has, Callum. And before I close the meeting, I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with antenna and experimenting with antennas. And somebody who really comes from the practical side and building things and trying things out. And I think that was a wonderful presentation here. So thank you very much for joining us here and being with us. So yeah. Yes, applause from the, at the moment, 211 people in the audience. I just switch back to myself now. Yeah. So thanks, Callum. Thanks a lot. Yeah, I'm going to close this meeting now, and we will be back at 11:05 UTC, then with the 2 streams of QRP knowledge share. Until then, everybody, I wish everybody a nice morning, and yeah, see you later. Bye.
A very good day. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye now.
Okay, bye, Callum.